I'm sharing now again, yeah? So, the levels of development, as they are called, they're a bit of a funny topic in a way, because when I first started finding out about them more like deeply, I mean, they're in the training that Don and Russ offered, but when I started like digging into them a little bit, they fascinated me because it's just such a cool concept. And the only thing that didn't really resonate with me was the development bit, because I don't find them to be levels of development exactly. I find them to be levels of, I was thinking about, because developing, you're developing one way, you're not developing backwards. Life doesn't do that. It doesn't really. So the idea that we could go up and down the levels of what the levels of, and I was thinking, is it awareness? Is it like functionality? You talk about high functioning people and low functioning. Is it that? And we talk about psychological maturity. And I just ended up realizing it's a level of ego identification. And depending on the context you're in and the people you're talking to, ego identification might be a bit much to talk about, which is where like the levels of balance, I like the levels of balance. I think that's a more relatable concept usually to people. So I tend to call them that when I remember to. But the thing with them is they are describing how much at any given time I'm like in allegiance with or identify with the ego or not, which tells us, if we're willing to walk down that route and talk about egos and whatever else, it tells us there is something that's not ego, that's also in play here. And whether we call that essence or, balance or Christ consciousness or whatever, it's something that's not this tight little me that's convinced that this body and my current experience and the previous ones I had, that they're all there is to me, but which is actually connected to the sensation or the experience that there is something else here too. And the fine thing about that is we don't have to bother with trying to define that other thing. We just have to look at whatever ego nets I'm currently stuck in. And so I don't know if you can read the quote, but there's a Russ quote on here just saying the levels also aren't, there's levels of all kinds of all sorts of levels in a growth that have been described. And the levels of development are a bit different in that they're not necessarily made up in the way that you can go just, you can't say this level of development is this level on the spiral dynamics or whatever, because it's not the same kind of development that we're talking about. So I think there's lots to say about that, but that's another lecture, I think, so I don't want to go into that, but just to see that this is quite specific about how well what Russ says in the quote is, how well are my centers lined up, which is another way of saying how identified am I with my ego, because what the ego does is it pokes about in the centers, and it's usually just throws one of them out and says this is not useful, and heavily identifies with another one and uses the middle one to back up, basically, is what the ego does. And this specifically comes into play when we arrive at the orange bit of the strange elongated egg on the picture, which is like the average levels, which is where most people will be most of the time. And so what they are is a 3x3 staircase, because there is no coincidence that there's 9 levels. It's actually, from what Don said, it's what he ended up with when he sorted behaviours and traits showing up with any given type. He sorted them into like piles, because there were 2s that were, so generous and genuinely caring and truly, altruistic. And then there were 2s who were pathological stalkers. And he was like, how is this the same personality type? How is this even, yeah? And so we realized there is this like sequence of it's like a little rainbow or a little spectrum for each type. And he realized when he put these piles, when he put the things they had in piles for each type, he ended up having 9 piles per type. And I don't know if he sort of steered that a bit towards being 9 or it just ended up that way. But the fact is, these levels and the 9 qualities of identification, or whatever you call it, we can see them in other teachings as well, actually. But something that's a bit specific to these levels is that you have 3 by 3. So it's not just a cute color scheme that the healthy ones are yellow and here. I mean, it's the yellow is arbitrary, but the fact that there is something with the first 3, and there is something with the second 3, and there is something else with the last 3. And this is not, it's like the jump from level 3 to level 4 is slightly more significant, or quite a lot more significant actually, than the jump between level 4 and level 5. And so if we look at it in terms of the ego, we can see that in the healthy levels, of course, there's an ego. It's hard for me to function if I'm just this cloud of essence floating around on earth. I need to make appointments and I need to have, dinner so my body will keep working as it should. So the ego does those things for us, and it's nice. And so in the healthier levels, it's like I have this allegiance with my ego it's not an allegiance so much as maybe just coexisting with it. It's like it's an animal that I keep in this enclosure, and it tells me when I need to eat, and does all these things to me, which is nice. But it's a tool at my disposal, rather than what happens when I come into the average range, when the ego becomes kind of a savior, and it's like I buy into the propaganda that says, "I'll fix this for you if you only do that," and I take a back seat and I allow the ego to take the reins, or my programming, or reactivity, or whatever you call it. And so the identification is much stronger. This is me. I'm going to have to do this, otherwise I'm toast. That sounded very 8ish, but we all have it. We just do it differently. And if we're in the unhealthy range, then the identification is not just over 50%. It's just complete. There is no belief. There is no recollection that there is anything else here. It's like all there is like I get this image of a baby, or a baby just before he's born. There's no room in the womb for anything else than the baby. It's just full. That's the kind of feeling. No, comparison otherwise. I think babies are nice. Average, or sort of unhealthy levels, not so much. But that's it. Just there isn't room for anything else, which is why at the unhealthy range, we usually need intervention of some kind. We need help. We don't just like help because we can use it all the way up, but at this stage we need it. We can't really get out of there usually ourselves. But so what happens, and what I wanted to sort of narrow in on today, and by the way, as I told my groupies in the group, or my participants, is that I have a booklet, a PDF booklet on the levels of development. And anyone who's either here today or watching this recording, send me an email. My email address will go out in the email that you get with the recording link. Send me an email and I'll send you this PDF for free. It's €7, so it's not really expensive, but because I don't want to spend 2 hours going through the things that you can read in a book. And so if you want specifics on how the levels look for each type and every level, read Don Risso's books and Russ Hudson's. I think Understanding the Enneagram is one where the levels as a concept is quite neatly explained. And in both personality types and wisdom of the Enneagram, there are aspects of each type description that says this happens in this level. So there are lots of information in their material. But so again, what I wanted to narrow in on was this thing that shifts when we sort of plonk down into the average range, which, I mean, usually if I say we plonk down, as I said, we spend most of our time usually in the average range, but the description of the dynamics of the levels tend to be from the up and down, like from the higher ground, from essence, from glory, whatever, ego, freedom, to complete ego, yuck, which is kind of depressing sometimes. And we'll get back to how we can sort of reverse that a little bit. But so that's why I say the fall from level 3. What happens is that we get a very particular aspect of what Don Riso calls our basic fear. Every type is a basic fear. If you've done Enneagram Institute material, you know the ones are afraid of being bad, corrupt, or evil. Twos are afraid of not being loved for who they are. Threes are afraid of just being or they believe they just are what they accomplish. So they're afraid that they won't, there is nothing in there if you lift the lid of the accomplish, etc., etc. And what happens at level 3 is that the ego roost that might come up at level 3, and if you believe that, you will plump down to level 4. That's a twist on that fear, which basically says to avoid this that you hate so much, the mere idea of, to avoid that, you need to crank up the volume, you need to do more. It's not enough to just be this lovely being that with the good stuff of your personality type. You need, well, it's good that you are these things, it says, but you need to ramp it up a bit. You need to not just be, if I'm an 8, I don't need to just be this protecting, powerhouse, whatever, but I need to really prove to the world that I'm this. And even if we're the least proving, I mean, if I'm a 9, and it's like what I'm afraid of is annihilation and fragmentation and everything going to, pieces. So what it says is you need to crank up the volume of you, which if I'm a 9 is keep the peace. Don't rock the boat. Do this. And so all of us have that at this level 3. The risk of the ego saying, hello, have you thought about this? And sort of coming in there to want to argue for its own participation or its own increased participation, basically. And when this happens, what happens when I sort of believe this and get down to level 4 and believe the ego's, propaganda and try to do more me. If I'm a 4, I want to be a bit more set aside and unique. And if I'm a 5, I need to learn something more before I can actually do this. And if I'm a 6, I need to find this bloody sure thing that I can rely on to tell me what's right and how do I find this? Where is it? And what happens is the ego, again, will do something to how we use the centers. It'll scramble the centers for us in various ways for different type. Happens differently for different types, but what happens is the alignment of the centers is no longer in balance. We start doing some stuff. If I'm an 8, I start cranking up the doing, the belly center. I rope in the mental center or the the head center to help, and I strategize and I do stuff, and the heart center is like, no, thank you, not so much. So I want to have that out of the way because heart center is the heart is this needy thing that it just slows me down, and I don't want that. So this happens. And the type fixation that I have, which in Russ's do-over fixations, the 8th fixation is going to be objectification, comes in very handy. It's like the ego said, oh, look at this. We're things. All of us are things. I'm a thing. You're a thing. I just have to do this chess thing with it. And it moves stuff around so that it turns out the way I want it to. So we have the fixation of whichever type we are. And we have this weird scrambling or imbalance of the centers. And we can just basically say we start overdoing our own center in various ways. And this will constitute what Don called the wake-up call. Now, when we learn about type and various features of type. We learn about passions and fixations, and these are always going to be there. And it's like, not necessarily. What we learn about the types is usually the mid-range, again, stuff. If you read any generic description of a 7 or a 2 or a 4 or whatever, you read what the 7 is going to be partying all over the place. I mean, obviously, there is a lot of stereotyping going on, but the stereotyping easily happens from these average levels, because the average levels, we're not so balanced. We're a bit of a stereotype. We're just not necessarily the one in the book, but it's like we, again, overdo some things, underdo others. So in some renditions of these levels, Don himself would call this level 4 the level of fixation, because this is when it's like it's there. A 6 will doubt even in the healthy range, but everybody needs to doubt now and again. It's healthy. So it's not the doubt in itself. Even objectification for the 8, I can do that. It's good sometimes. I can do that in a useful manner, or I can do it as an ego decree, and that's where I'm in the average crap, basically. There are other renditions when he calls it the level of imbalance, which I think is a bit less useful because it's all imbalance from there down. So it's not really saying anything. So what is also important is these were not, Don didn't say, these are the levels and it's going to be this trajectory or that trajectory, and you're going to be exactly like this all the time when you're in this level. Because on paper, they are very distinguishable and very true. But in my actual life, I will be doing all kinds of stuff within a day or an hour sometimes. So what we need, sometimes you can visualize it as a board with holes in it for each level. And in one of these holes, you have a peg. This is where your center of gravity, Don called it, or your default level, I usually call it, is. But then you have a little elastic band at the end of this peg. So you can bounce a little bit. So even if I'm existing normally from, say, level 4, I can bounce up momentarily to level 2. I have a really nice day and something is happening to make like the really best of me come out. It's not like I had an epiphany. It's not like I got enlightened or extremely mature over the course of the afternoon. Just something very nice happened and put me in a very nice frame of mind. So I can sort of live out this level 2 for a little bit, maybe, but it's not that I've necessarily moved the peg. I've just bounced in the elastic. And I can bounce down in the elastic as well to something not entirely comfortable. But I think you've all experienced that when you sort of have a center of gravity. You might not be aware of it as such, but you have the regular you that you've been in like for the last few months or whatever. And then you have this day and life just smacks you in the face and something is really ugh, and you sort of know while this reactivity is playing out and going on, that who's that? How am I doing this? Because this is not at all what it's really strange. And the good thing of this hopping is something I also want to mention before we go into an exercise, which is that we can leverage this, especially the latter icky experience when we're actually at a nicer level regularly, and then something happens and we have the shittiest day and we start behaving very childishly or whatever, and we sort of know, it's like we stand beside ourselves and say, okay, wow, but we're still powerless to stop us. And what usually happens is that we don't want to go there because I know this is not me now, so we just sort of, best case, disregard it, worst case, just do whatever we do. But the thing is, when this happens, we have this amazing opportunity to actually look at what just happened. It's like, he said that, and that was so bad. And it's like, one part of me will say, of course he said that. He didn't mean it that way. You're overreacting. You're doing this because this and this and that happened before or in your childhood or whatever, but it's still happening. And it's like, instead of using the part that knows, instead of using that as an excuse to not really go into that feeling, I might as well. Because as I tried to illustrate on this slide, it's like if I'm suddenly in a lower level, you can see these little guys actually are at exactly the same level. They have their hair. If you put a horizontal line, their hair is going to be exactly the same level. It's just that one has the center of gravity in the healthy levels, one has the center of gravity in the average levels. And if I do have a center of gravity in a healthier place, it doesn't need to be the healthy levels. But if my center of gravity or my default level is actually a bit higher, then I might as well take the opportunity to explore this reactivity that I'm having from this more enlightened, relatively more enlightened perspective. Instead of trying, as we usually do, we're having a whatever level we're at, and then we read a book and it's like, try and manifest your virtue. And it's like, nah, it doesn't really help because how can I do that? I don't know what that is. I have no experience, or I have no access to any experience at the moment of that level. So that's a tip. And if you do get the booklet, the whole experiential like recommendations or exercises in the booklet are about specifically this. How can I address the level I'm currently operating from, actually, even with a sort of more elevated perspective I really have. Gonna make sense, I promise. So, is it possible to read these letters? Good. So this is just to see, we can look at type. I don't know if I can even see because I have this, and if I, now it's going to be bigger for you too, right? Because I just needed to see what it says. Yeah, we can just do the one as a kind of example, and we can see this, that reasonable, rational, and conscientious is like the level 2 stuff, and then truthful, just, civilized, the person at level 1 in a really healthy and good place. And then this got to do more. You've got to sort of really nail down this now. So you keep being this just, civilized, humane being. That's what the ego says. And one of the ways I will try and do that as a one is by this, what's called the wake-up call here, which is a sense of personal obligation to fix everything myself. If you're a one, you'll recognize this. If you're one in your tribe type, you'll likely recognize this. But the thing is, if I believe this, the reason it's called a wake-up call is that if you're a one and this comes at you, or if you're a two, or if you're whatever type, do this so you can see them. If you're whatever type, when this comes, it's an opportunity for you not to go there. It's an opportunity for me to say, it's like, I feel as an 8, I have to push, I have to do this. It's not dissimilar to the 1, it's just with a very different flavor to it. And it's like, I need to re-steer this whole thing. When this comes, that's an opportunity for me. And whoever you are, whatever comes at the wake-up call is an opportunity for you to look. Maybe if this weren't exactly true, what might be the truth instead? Because when I do believe this, I'm going to be this, and I don't know if I can see it, but it's like, it's the level 4-1. I'm going to buy into it, and I'm going to be this striving, improving, debating, incorporating the fixation, which in the one's case is judging. And so I'm going to be judging myself, not least, and everything else, because I need to fix everything. And on for each type. And I think you usually send out the slides as well, do you, Ingrid? Because then you'll be able to see this. And again, if you look in Wisdom of the Enneagram, you'll have not characteristics, but you'll have descriptions of all the levels. I didn't do all of them because it's so small, so you can't read it. But so this is like the principle. And when I looked at these wake-up calls, I thought, there's got to be something the flip. If my wake-up call as an 8 is this realization that I need to I need to struggle for things to happen. That's if I don't do anything, nothing will come. I need to force this. What would be like the liberating recognition that was the antidote to that? And when I say antidote, I don't mean from this lower level that I could try and get this other perspective. But what perspective would I experience if I went to believe, if I'm in level 3, the wake-up call comes and I don't buy into it, I don't get on the train, I just stand there and see that. And what might the reverse be for me? So the LRs here, or the liberating recognitions, are just suggestions that I put there to illustrate the kind of realization or suspicion, even not necessarily that we know this or realize this, oh look, but we can just, well, maybe just maybe I'm actually carried, not cornered. Maybe this is actually happening for me. Maybe I can rest for a bit. And the ego goes, don't you believe it? Because you're going to die, basically what the ego says in whatever form, because of the type will do it differently, but still. And so we have these like two, it's like a seesaw at this shift between level 3 and level 4. So we can say the wake-up call, or the belief in the wake-up call, is going to like keep me down in the average range, or get me down into the average range if I'm not there. And the liberating recognition or realization is going to actually help lift me out of there when it's an actual recognition, when it's an actual realization, not when it's just an idea. I can try the idea on for size. I can do that too. I mean, we're going to do an exercise in a moment, and we're going to, in a way, try it on for size. But yeah, we usually need to do that with some extra features. And so I'm going to do an exercise now with the extra features. So you can just look at the wake-up call of, so we're looking at that of your type, or that of any type in your tri-type, whatever sort of comes at you as, okay, this sounds familiar to me. And you look at that wake-up call, and maybe you just notice, I like to look at what I call energetic signatures, which is like the combination of input from all the centers when this is my reality. So when I believe as an 8 that things happen only when I push, when I struggle, when I make them happen, I mean, obviously that's a thought that believes I'm alone here. Like I'm the only one doing this. I need to, I need to bring it. And what's the emotional climate? For me as an 8, it's like, rather not, thank you. And because again, the heart will be sort of put out of the picture. If I dig a little bit deeper, I might find, if I've been doing inner work for some time, I might find there is an emotional climate, actually. It's this one. And also I might look at like bodily tensions. Is there any particular stance? Is there holdings or like tendencies? Do I want to lash out? Do I want to shrink base? I tend to come to movement. It's like, do I want to do this and attack somebody or expand, or do I want to do this and just, get away, or shrink, or go this way or that way? But just notice what happens with you, with your wake-up call from this list. And maybe what you notice, maybe you just have a couple of words, and it doesn't have to be all the centers. Just make sure you look in all the doors. I mean, we might not have a clear emotion. We might not have a clear physical thing. We might not have a clear thought necessarily. But whatever sort of comes up when you take inventory of these three, and maybe you want to jot down something on a piece of paper. So next, I'm going to invite you to some further exploration, for which I think it's perfectly fine to put your screen off. And you might want to stand up on the floor, take some space where you can move about a little bit. You know, just to feel whatever instructions I give, you know, you need to check, is this congruent with whatever I want to do right now? But it's, again, it's an invitation to an exploration, and this is how I would do this exploration. And so begin by just standing there, just feeling your body, just might wriggle it a little bit or move around and just sort of stretch and sort of fill out your physical thing, the thing that's like the you moving through this life. And you might want to bring to mind a moment of reactivity lately where this wake-up call sort of seemed to have been active. Maybe you did notice it as such, maybe you didn't. It's not really important. And don't pick something that's like the end of the world bad. Just pick something that gives a taste, if you will, of this particular reactivity that you might feel familiar with. And when you have it, or look for it, or maybe you don't have it and you're frustrated about it, and that's actually the reactivity, doesn't really matter. But whatever's here right now, having invited this wake-up call into your experience, I'm going to share some sound, and I invite you to allow your body to explore like the sensations, the responses to this wake-up call. Not necessarily the wake-up call even as a thing, but the sensations and responses and emotions and thoughts coming in response to the sensations and responses and emotions and thoughts that's already here because of this reactivity. So just allow those to be there. Allow your body to move the way it likes. And again, I'll share some sound with you. You might want to do what we call dancing. Maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want to move. Maybe you don't even want to move. You just decide for yourself. I would like for Ingrid to just do a thumbs up if this sounds good. Yeah. And I'm going to start just stretching a little bit, feeling your feet on the floor. Don't need to produce anything. Allow the body to respond.
yanjye hakiri kare none nshuti yanjye reka ngusabe iki none nshuti yanjye reka ngusabe iki ntuzanyibagirwe nshuti ntuzanyibagirwe ntuzanyibagirwe babarira ntuzanyibagirwe yo ntuzanyibagirwe babarira ntuzanyibagirwe bagirwe
Just stay where you are and just notice what happens when you stop moving and something within you doesn't really. Something within you possibly still moves or hasn't really settled yet because energy has been moved around. But you can just stand there and feel your feet against the floor, whatever body parts against whatever's holding them. And just notice what happens in your body. Just notice if anything has shifted in the body from how it was before this little workout, whatever form it took for you. And maybe very gently you might want to go back. You can check with yourself to the screen and look at the liberating recognition that corresponds to the wake-up call. Maybe you know what it is already. If you don't, you might want to look and just see what happens in your body, in your mind, when you read this, when you think back to it, to the liberating recognition that's there, like the kind of alternative worldview from this wake-up call reactivity. And maybe there's something within that phrasing, something within this recognition that responds, or something within you that responds to the truth in this recognition. Maybe you can even remember a situation where you felt this, where you truly believed this, experienced this to be true. and might notice which thoughts, which emotions, which energetic aspects are connected to this liberating recognition. And then maybe again, if that feels right, allow your body to move in response.
Do you hear me talk to you? I whisper through dawn. Let me walk you through your lives. Only a second. That's all it takes to realize there's 100,000 angels by your side. There's 100,000 angels here
So you could maybe finish with just standing for a little bit. Perhaps you want to bring thanks back for this moment of presence, or for any new awareness, or even to yourself for showing up to this exploration. It's a sweet gift. And then gently and in your own time, find your way back to whatever you were sitting on, back to the screen and the rest of us. So I'm thinking we could perhaps do another breakout, like groups of 3 again, and just allow the opportunity to share any insights, surprises, difficulties, or most importantly, maybe, did you discover anything in this little practice that you can take with you into your life, into your moments of recognizing this wake-up call being sounded in your ear, or to me, or whatever, and just a bit of free sharing. We'll have some debriefing in the bigger group as well, but I thought so you can have more time and perhaps a little more intimate setting. Yeah.
How many minutes, Cicci?
Well, I don't know what it was last time.
7.
I thought that was quite, but you know, shall we give it, yeah, give it a quarter of an hour.
15.
Is that too long? No, I'm a bit over time already, but this is sort of not very well planned anyway. So it's like, I'm thinking we want to have space for a debrief in the group, and we want to have space for some Q&A. And you tell me, I don't know what you want to do at the end
Let's
of
make
whatever.
it 10 minutes, and then there'll be more time for questions. Is that okay?
Yeah. That's good.
Great. Opening 3, 2, 1.
You can do that, and we can let it, you know, I suppose we can have the Q&A, Simon. I mean, we can go wherever it needs to go. Yeah.
Let's do that. Would anyone like to share or ask a question or reflect on how this has been for you? Fiona.
Please.
Yes, thanks, Cicci. This has been really very interesting, and I love the concept of the liberating recognitions. I wonder if you could give me a little bit of clarity from your thinking, what the liberating recognition for the Enneagram 1 is, because it says perfection requires my joy, not my judging and fixing. Could you expand on that a bit, please?
I suppose, in the sense that I think most ones I know, and my one heritage, I'm an 8, so I can't have 1 in my tritype, but I do have a ton of 1 from my family. And my experience and impression is that the 1 so desperately wants to establish this order, this goodness that is in the form of, this good order kind of thing, which is love, I think. At the end of the day, it's like this goodness. And when the ego comes into it with this fixation bit of judging, then it's like and the wake-up call, which says, I'm the one who needs to fix this. I need to take this on. Now I need to see all these things, whether they're in me, whether they're in somebody else or in the world. And it's like, how can I need to take all this on, and it needs to be good. And some ones will experience it that way, I think, and others will like zone in on something. And this is really important that I fix this particular thing. So that will vary. But I think what I, as a 1, miss out on in that is the aspect of joy. The joy in the good stuff that's already here. The joy in the innate goodness of the world wherever I find it. And in myself already, despite all this, judging which goes on from the superego's point of view, there is something else here. Just like there's something else except the ego, there's something else except all the fixing that needs to be done. And I think that's where I tried to go. I had some trouble finding the words because I needed them to fit into one-liners, which is, these are always a bit and we need to sort of see what does this mean, like by unpacking it as you're asking me to do now. So I think it's to see I'm not slacking off as a 1 with this joy thing, if I can find it. If there isn't joy, at least at the end of the judging, I don't mean at the end of final, sometime later in life, I mean at the end of the day, I've fixed this now. If there's a genuine joy rather than what next, then that's a clue that I'm on something of the right track, I think. But I think also from what I see in my 1 friends and relatives and in the world, it's like joy is one of the first things that goes out the window because we can have that later. Now we first need to fix this. So that's where the joy came in. And I think just like the 9, that it's easy for the 1, I think it's easy for all of us, obviously, but maybe especially the gut center, it's easy to believe, to like count myself out of the equation. The 9 wants to, put peace into the world and sort of diminishes or disappears itself in the process. And the 1 does that in doing the right and the good and the creating this order, and the joy gets thrown out with the bathwater. And with the 8, it's the whole heart being thrown out with the bathwater. So it's like that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you. Yes, that really does expand and explain where you were coming from, putting those words together. So very helpful. Thank you so much.
Is there anything else anyone wants to say or?
Okay, so you all have lovely accents. All the people that I met in the breakout chats were South African or like close to South Africa. what is this group that you all met each other in? Is there like so Yelena just invited me hi Yelena yesterday. So I only learned about this yesterday. But like there's a group like IE something that where
No,
all of you are members or is there how did you all meet?
there's a Facebook group where we've been meeting, and I'll put a link to the Facebook group in the comments. This group started originally in someone's living room in South Africa, and there were about 10 people. And that was Renate Landman started that, and then she invited me, and I got involved in it and started doing more formal teaching there. And then during COVID, the group expanded online, and now look where we're from. Could everyone please put the city that you're in the chat, and then you'll see how wonderful and diverse this group is. So there are quite a lot of South Africans, but they're people from everywhere. And thank you for joining us, Marcus. You're wondering what weird Enneagram cult you've landed in.
Great.
And also, if anybody would like to be on the Professional Practitioners WhatsApp group, I know that some of you are already on it, but I'm going to put my phone number in the chat. And if you'd like to be added to that group, just send me your name and I'll add you. We share quite a lot there, practitioner insights, hideous Enneagram confessions, and that kind of thing. And in terms of questions, I wanted to just come back to something that you said right near the beginning, Cicci, around as we fall down the levels, one of our centers gets thrown out. And I'm not sure that everybody knows that theory, and it's so incredibly helpful. I think it's one of the most important Enneagram teachings. And if you could just expand on that a little bit.
Yes. Again, if whoever we go to learn the Enneagram, I think many people are fond of saying that that every Enneagram type sort of, we're in one center, obviously, where we sort of have the center of gravity. If I'm an 8, I'm in the gut center. If I'm a 2, I'm in the heart center, etc. But then a lot of people will teach you that we also have one center that we sort of negate or repress. And I think that's a sort of, it's a crude take on what I experience as the more nuanced one, which is the Don Risso and Ross Hudson concept of scrambling of the centers, which tells you that all the secondary types, or the ones on the hexad, not the 3, 6, and 9, but the others of us, we will basically, the ego will say, this is mine. In case of me, it's the belly, that like the gut center, the instinctual center. I'm an 8, this is my turf. And if I'm in the healthy levels, that's going to be where my problems show up too. I'm going to have like the issues are going to be like instinct related issues for the most part. And then when I come down into the average range, then the ego says, oh, we need some more reinforcement. Let's bring in the head, which is like the one physically closest to me on the Enneagram. And so if I'm an 8, I'll bring in the head center to help me like strategize and objectify. If I'm a 2, I'm a heart type, I'm going to bring in my closest center, which is the gut. So I don't, as a 2, just have these feelings. I'm doing my feelings. I'm being impulsive. Like the 7 does the same thing, but from the head perspective, I have the head and all the plans, and then I get the belly center or the gut center to help. So I'm very impulsive. I start doing everything, not just thinking about it. And that's how it sort of goes. If I'm a 4, I'm like this image type, but then the ego brings in the mind, or the head center, to sort of say, oh, who am I now? And it's like really this story is about who I am, to keep up this sense of identity for me. So that's the scrambling that goes on. And if I'm down in the really low levels, it gets roped in, all of it. It's like, if the fine thing is, for the secondary types, you still have this sort of untouched ground. So if you're a 3, 7, or 8, you have a heart center. If you go to a therapist, the therapist is going to say, look here, you have a heart too. And the client's going to go, no, thank you. But at some point, we might see that this is actually what we need to sort of complete the picture. And if I'm a 5, I have the mind, and then I start, the ego ropes in the heart to the emotions and the stories and the blah blah, and the body is long forgotten. And so I go to the therapist and they say, go do yoga. And it's like, so we bring in the last center as coaches or therapists, and they can actually help somebody. But when we come into, or when they come into, the client comes into the lower levels, they're all going to be a muck. So again, we'll need another kind of help if the center of gravity actually moves down there. Now, with the primary types, it's a little different, because what happens to those guys, like the 3s and the 6 and the 9s, there is this identification still as the others in the healthy centers, or the sort of healthy levels. But then what happens when I move down as a 9, I move down to level 4, and the ego says, okay, this is a bit too much. Let's have the body here, and then we have the mind and the heart as a soup down here. So they scramble the other 2 centers. As a 9, I scramble the head and the heart. As a 3, I scramble the head and the gut. As a 6, I scramble the sort of the body, sort of the gut and the heart. So the 6 will exist in a sort of duty mode when I do stuff and I feel stuff and I'm loyal to people, and I'm not thinking that much. Or I think and I think and I think, and I've got no connection to doing anything. So it's like more of a divide. So for the primary types, it's not so much a scrambling of my home base center, it's more of a compartmentalization. So there is this thicker wall to the other 2 capacities. So if I'm a 9, I might be very grounded and I might do dishes or chop wood or whatever and be very physical, but then I'm sort of out to lunch. And then when I come into my thinking and feeling stuff, I can think stuff and feel stuff and be in this daydream mode, but the head is sort of, the body is not there. So there's another kind of division that happens for those 3. That's the very short story about the scrambling of the centers.
Thank you so much. And it's very intriguing. I put a couple of little points in the chat for anyone who wants to know more about that. I'm sure they can get hold of you and hear about your work.
Absolutely. There's also a forthcoming book. I don't know if I'll make it this year, but it's going to be called, the work name is Enneagram Proficiency, which is very funny, obviously. And it's about these things sort of hung up on the levels, I suppose, in a way, but also what is all this? How do we understand these different features, not as just lists of look, a virtue or look, a fixation, but we see how does this interact to be this person that we are.
Yeah.
So that's going to hopefully come out at some point.
Wonderful.
Yes, Yelena.
Thank you. Yelena.
Sorry, I've got problems with my camera, so I'm on my phone. Just a quick question for you, Cicci, if that's okay. I can't read exactly the comment that I kept from Russ Hudson in one of the groups. This is from like 4 years ago. So I'll just try to paraphrase something that he said regarding the levels of development and just our stress points. So this was in the context of us discussing type 3 in one of the Facebook groups. And he was explaining that he noticed a phenomenon called shunting, but in particular for 3s first and foremost. And then he kind of realized that this happens with other types, in the sense of that a type, somebody that doesn't actually go down the levels of health as such, but will move over to the stress point and get stuck. So he explained that in the context of 3, that might look like 3 moves to 9 and, not necessarily dissociates, but kind of exhibits the lower health levels as you might see in a 9. And what he also said in this comment is that he believed, and research too, that what personality was doing is getting us stuck in a stress point to prevent us dropping down the levels. And this is the only time that I've ever seen anyone say this, and I've kept it in my phone on my notes. So I'd like to ask you about that.
Yeah, I've heard him say that too. I fully believe it's true. I've sort of seen it. And it's exactly that. I mean, we like our homeostasis, don't we? We sort of bounce up and down in this elastic band, but we have the center, and it's harder to move the center. If you try to lose weight or gain weight, you know what I'm talking about. It's the same thing. The body's like, I'm happy here, thank you. And it takes a bit of a bigger thing for us, even if we do slim down for the wedding or bunch up or sort of muscle up for whatever, it's like it's not going to stick unless we shift something deeper, which is the same with the levels. And also the body has all kinds of, or the system has all kinds of built-in ways of doing this. And this is, I think, typically not only, I mean, this will also be in the book, by the way, because I think the stress point is definitely one thing that comes up and colors the type, the 3 in your case, and will be sort of colored by a lot of 9 suddenly. Again, it's like I am at level 5. To stop myself falling further, the ego will say, oh, look, we'll have this toolbox now. That possibly works. And it might, and it might not. And I think it's not even just the stress point, it's the so-called integration point too, in this everyday sense. In the deeper sense, it's going to be that this is more where he talks about the really getting stuck. This is going to be the stress point. And this is people say, it's debunked, there are no directions of the arrows. Yes, there are directions of the arrows. It's just that you can go both ways for both stress and integration, yes, but also it means something. All 8s will have, an 8 can't go up the levels unless I've integrated the 2. I cannot get there because I need the heart. That's I need this bit that's sort of offsetting something within me, etc., etc. So I do need that for integration. I will exhibit some 5-ness, but not necessarily as a 5, but as part of the 8 if I go like down the levels. But also there's this shunting that you mentioned, which is not necessarily getting stuck for a long time. You can do it over a day. You can sort of have this apathy episode as a 3. I can have an introversion episode or like throw away the world, do my Googling or my writing or whatever, because I can't even, as an 8. So we do, yeah, I don't know. There is so much to say about this, tons and tons and tons. I read a blog entry once, which is now a Substack entry on my Substack, which is about the levels of stress and levels of integration and all the ways we can understand these and why it's not as simple as this is correct or it's not. It's a bit more nuanced than that. But yeah, I do agree with what Russ said, and I think that's another option. It just didn't fit into today's bit because it's a lot already.
Who else has got a question or a reflection? And don't be intimidated by Cici's level of Enneagram knowledge. If you've got a personal question or anything that's sticking in your mind, please feel welcome. Everybody here has different levels of Enneagram depth. And as you know, this thing just keeps getting deeper. So please feel welcome. Sam, your hand's up. Yes.
Yeah, and Ceci, so I really enjoyed the opportunity to do the movement and to explore in that way. And I appreciated the way that you kind of, at the end, you got us just to stay with the transition between doing the movement and then becoming still again. And to see what that was like. And it was like you kind of, you just stretched out that moment of transition and gave me sort of some understandings of what that felt like in my body and then where the energy was and what I'd kind of not exactly achieved, but how I was different as a result of doing that. And I had the sense that, you were offering us a tool, really, a way of being with reactivity or understanding it more. And I'm just wondering, just if you could join some of the dots between why you chose to put that into your session and what you hope we might, be able to, how we might be able to possibly extend from that experiencing.
Yeah, that's a really low level question, right, Ingrid? It's really, I'll try. I put it in because it happened in the process. That's usually the simple explanation. But also I think when I put experiential bits in my teachings, which is my preference, and which I try and do as much of as I can, because I think that's the teaching actually. I want to offer a kind of, I mean, we don't really need this practice. We can do it in everyday life, in theory, but we have so much else going on in everyday life, and we don't, come to think of it. Even, I mean, my one husband says, I've been practicing this lately, and I go, oh, fuck, do you practice it? I just heard it, and then I thought, oh, that's a good idea, and I forgot it, because life happens, so we're different that way. But so I want the teachings or the learning communities or whatever practices that we do be like magnifying glasses in a way. That you have this little thing we can, as you said, stretch out is a very good word, because I would love to do. It's like, how can I really look into this bit that I maybe just switch over, like this is was then, this is now, and I don't realize something is actually happening in the transition, or something happens which I really am repulsed by and I don't want to go there. And these two, anybody who is willing, can sort of just stretch it out a little bit and look closer at it, for precisely the reason that you said, that these, in my experience, are the bits where I can find even me, who's not going to do the list and the practice for the next week necessarily, I can find how something felt, and I can relate to what that meant, and I can relate. It's an experience. It's like the experiential aspect of it, and the experience cannot be unhad. In a way, I can forget stuff I learned. I can forget about experiences, but the system doesn't forget. It's still something I have in my sort of awareness, whether I'm conscious of this awareness or not. And so when I go on, I meant for us actually to have another breakout room, but we're not going to be able to do that because, again, time, to see how can I actually, what can I do specifically the next time this happens. But it's like for you to take home from this exercise, maybe, or from whatever occurred to you in the process. How can I install multiple wake-up call pointers? Like this call might be, from Don Risso's perspective, the same every time, but from your experience, or in your experience, it'll be, I'm getting sweaty, my hands are getting sweaty, or I'm breathing more shallowly, or I'm going to the loo again for the third time this hour, or whatever it is. And you can say, this is something. You can start being this little sleuth about your own reactivity, and it's actually quite fun, especially when we do this in groups. It's like what Ingrid said, you have Enneagram, what did you call it, meltdowns, I don't know. You sort of, you interact with people, and it's like, yeah, well, this is personality, welcome to the human race. So it's also sort of de-dramatized a little bit, because it's not, I'm so bad, I'm doing this, I have this reactivity. Well, you and me both. So we can learn that it's not dangerous to step into it for a little bit and step out of it and look at it, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's
a great answer to your question.
Thank you. And also,
we have so many hands.
Anchoring these things, like in NLP, those of you who know anchoring or hypnotherapy, that when you have a taste, in Sufism they call it dalk, it's kind of a taste of heaven in a way. And when you've had these moments of presence, what can you put in your life? It might be an object, or something like lighting a candle, or remind yourself. For me, when I wash the dishes, I go into a different state of awareness. So that's a kind of something I've planted in my day. So if there's a way that you can think of the experience of presence that you had, and link it to something that you do every day. And that puts a kind of switch in your day to just remember, am I here? So those kinds of things are also helpful. So there's the sleuth thing, which is fantastic, but then also, small things, drinking water, anything. So
And from what Sam just said, what you did was you did the first little dance or whatever workout we call it, with this reactivity from the average levels, and then quite on your own accord, you shifted that into something from the first piece of music. Or with the first piece of music, what you shifted into, I don't know, maybe you didn't end up automatically in your liberating recognition. That's not necessarily the point, but it shifts when I go into it and I allow it to be there, and maybe even have a voice or a movement or whatever. I allow this energy to be there. We're taught to push it down. We're taught to light the candle that Ingrid's talking about at the cost of exploring the experience. And so please light the candle, but please, if you do have time, allow this experience to be there first, because it will evolve into something else. And that's also something that I want to shed light on, because it's just I think today's world is full of how to get from here to there, to the good stuff. And it's like, please don't go there too fast, because again, you're doing yourself a disservice by doing that, because you're not transforming anything.
thank you. What Steve Marsh calls the hamster wheel of self-improvement.
Yeah.
Let's not let the Enneagram, our super ego, get hold of the Enneagram and now you are going to change and you better improve. Notice when that happens, because that doesn't help us. It floods us with cortisol and shame, and there we get stuck. So before I talk more, Bridget.
Thank you, Cicci, for this amazing conversation. And I'm wondering, is the wake-up call at a shock point, are those the same things? Are they different? How do you see those two things interacting? And I'm actually, Sam, I think I'm going back to one of your conversations about shock points from an earlier community of practice.
I think they're not necessarily the same thing, in the sense that not necessarily not the same thing. I mean, it's like one is a substance and the other is a thought. I don't know, or vice versa. But it's like the shock point will be in how I can conceptualize it, is in my general trajectory as where I'm going with maybe this peg that I'm moving around in these levels, or not necessarily even that, but it's like that's where the shock points would come into the levels of development discussion. I think it's like something happens in my life that either I just come to a flat and I realize something needs to give for something to change, or life does that for me, thank you, and sort of smacks me over by, handing me I'm sacked from work, or I'm having a miscarriage, or I'm, whatever, somebody dies, and I get a shock point from the outside. But the shock point would be more from a bigger thing, I think, like bigger caliber event. The wake-up call might be something on my way to work, where I just notice, I mean, this guy standing in an elevator in an old castles type building. We were in one of the trainings with the Enneagram Institute in Wales, and he was in this elevator. How they had an elevator in an old castle, I don't know, but they did. And it was one of these, metal chain doors, and then the door outside of that. And he was pulling away the first bit, and he was going to open the door to get out of the elevator, and it didn't work. Didn't open, and he was like 3 floors up, and he was late for the thing, and he was this was a fellow 8, and he was like yanking this lever or handle or whatever on the door, and it didn't work. And then he just and then he saw there's a little chain hanging down, and it's as a note saying pull chain lightly, and he was like, okay, and he pulled the chain lightly and he went out. So that was a wake-up call where he had been aware of the concept. But it's like, I'm now trying to crank up something to get through this fucking thing that doesn't work. And it's like that, when I have that, and that can be putting my shoes on or just holding this cup a bit with a bit more strength than really. It's like to translate the 8 wake up call to a really, really, really small thing. It's like when I use more energy than I actually need for doing, if it's writing on my keyboard. Have you written on your keyboard when you've been stressed and angry? What happens to your fingers? What happens to your neighbor saying, what can you type more quietly, please? It's like, so that's the thing. It's like the wake-up call can be really, really, really subtle thing in the course of our day, whereas the shock points are like more significant events seen from a larger distance, as it were, from if we look at our life.
Mm.
That's my take
Can
on
I
it.
add something there that might help as well? Is that the shock points are a very specific body of process Enneagram theory from Gurdjieff, and they happen as you move around the circle. So they happen at 3 and 6. So that's a whole body of knowledge in itself. I love the way you described it, Cicci, because you took it out of theory into life. But just note to self, it's part of the process Enneagram Gurdjieff body of knowledge. Okay. Manya, thanks. So we've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I know. Well, it might be very quick. I'm just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, there's an incredible space that can open up when we're reflecting with one another, like when we go into these breakout rooms. And also, when Gurdjieff had this concept of the school, and in coaching, we have, the thing of actually having a space of talking to someone else. So I'm just thinking in terms of the wake-up call, or what you would say. I know it's a hell of a question, but what would you say if you had to say what gives that spark of gaining insight and getting a certain kind of liberation in going up the developments, if we're able to see when we talk with someone else something that we can't see on our own, like when Gurdjieff said, let's have a school, or when we have this community of practices, what actually is it? If you had to answer that question, what would you say is the thing that gives that spark?
Like, what is the incentive to go there?
Well, if I'm talking to someone and I gain an insight into the way that I'm being, still more than I would gain if I'm looking at by myself. What actually is that? Not that I won't gain insight by myself, but what is the reflective capacity that is brought into the dynamic when you're bringing in an interaction with other people that takes you up into greater insight or up a level of development?
I think we're a bit, it's going to be very brief now, but I think we're a bit dense as human beings, and we are a social species. So we really, we co-regulate. We use each other. We actually need each other for mirroring. When we're little babies, we absolutely need this. But even as adults, we need to have to see something. It's like when I say something out loud, I might burst into tears. I might have thought it 8 times before I open my mouth, and it's like a statement. But then I say it, and I hear what I'm saying. So there is this. I can actually have another when I'm mirrored in with you. Like I can have. It's like a
resonance.
Yeah, and what's with the stereo? Just the. I was just losing the word. The thing that makes it, sound. Amplify. Amplify. I think we're amplifiers for one another in that way. Yeah. Especially depending on the level of consciousness in the other person or whatever. But there is something with anyone, possibly even an animal. There is something because there is another recognition. Obviously, if it can understand you, a bit of a more bigger recognition. But yeah, I think that's.
And there's also something in the diversity. Like, for example, when we were in the one room, You know, I'm a 4 with a 3 wing, and the other person was a 3 wing, a 3 with a 4 wing. And there's something quite beautiful in the tension with each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that there's yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I so wanted to ask that. Thank you.
Thank you, Manya.
Mm.
So, any closing comments or thoughts, Cicci? I've put quite a few things in the comments, and I put a link to your Substack. I hope everyone's going to go there and subscribe. Cicci's Substack posts are very substantive and profound, and I know how much work must go into those. So don't miss out. And I think I put your website link in here near the beginning. Yes, I did. So right near the beginning, Lyckow.ac.
And the email, I think, will go out with this recording, and we're going to put all of that in there too, so that you can find it. And something else that's going to be in there, but I just want to very briefly mention it, is I'm going to have, finally, I meant to do this in the beginning of the summer, but then life happened again. But so I'm going to have a program starting on September 18th. It's going to be 3 modules, but every module is 4 hours. So it's like a 4-hour workshop, 3 modules, and monthly. So September 18th, October 16th, and November 20th, third Thursday of every month there. And it's going to be on, it's going to be on self-compassion and the superego, which is, again, trying to put it into a brief title, but it's what we need to do a lot of the questions. How do I access this? How can I go along? How can I keep doing this? We need to see who this is, and we need to see who this is not, and who has a lot of opinions on this, and all the ways we try and fabricate a sort of for self-compassion and miss out on the real thing. And so this is going to be about that, and how we can sort of regulate each other and ourselves to sort of navigate this inner growth in a way. It's going to be very strongly experiential, bit of teaching, but very strongly experiential and interactive.
Beautiful. So can people email you, or where do they sign up?
They will get the link in the with the email
when we send out the mail.
Send that to Renate, yes. And also, if you want the booklet that I was talking about on the levels of development, it's like 28 pages or whatever, send me an email. I think you have my email address, or you'll find it on the website, and say you want it. And up until the next community of practice, I'm going to send it for free for anyone who references this workshop.
Great. I'm going to put it in the chat now so that people don't have to go looking all over the place. Your email address and a reminder with booklet. And then I also just wanted to alert everybody.
It's a PDF, so it's not, you're not going to get a letter, you're going to get a PDF, so it's downloadable.
Okay, great. And also just a last announcement. Monday the 8th, I'm starting my team effectiveness facilitation course again. And that is 5 modules over 6 weeks, learning to facilitate team dynamics, shifting team dynamics, using the Enneagram and bringing in the tri-types and the instincts in that work. So that course is a lot of fun. People love it. Some people are doing it for the 3rd time. So I hope that some of you will join me in that. There are lots of tools and posters for workshops and all kinds of things. So that's 5 Mondays over 6 weeks. So if you're interested in that, you can just get hold of me. I think it was in Renate's mailer for today. My courses are attached there as a download. So I'd just like to say thank you so much, Cicci, for such an incredible session. It was so much more than theory. It was beautiful and soft and took us to a lovely place. And I think also contributed so much to building connections between us. And I'm very grateful for that too. So from all of our hearts, thank you. And it would be wonderful if you could just put a little feedback, something in the chat for Cicci. It's always nice to get some feedback. I'm going to do that right now myself too.
I can say that if anyone has a question that they didn't feel comfortable bringing up here or whatever comes up after this, please just shoot me an email. It's fine. I will respond. If I don't, I didn't get it, try another one. So I always respond to the emails that people sent. The Thousand Angels song is by a group called Bliss.
Okay.
It's on Spotify.
Thank you so much for reminding us. Yeah. And Yelena, thank you for joining us. You're in Australia.
Yes, Sydney. So it's like 2:10. Yeah,
Oh my God, that's commitment.
that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been hearing about you and on your Facebook group, so it's so wonderful that you could join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
she got out of bed at 3 a.m. once for the Last Instincts module. I'm so impressed still.
Yes, I did the instincts workshop with Cicci a few years ago. So it was yeah. I don't know. I mean, this is why I haven't been able to come to these meetings because it's a bit tricky for me in terms of times. But I know that Cicci, I was very interested in the levels of development. Thank
I'm
you.
so honored. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's
Thank you.
wonderful. Once a month, it's not so terrible. Hey, just take a day or two to recover. Thank you. And thanks, Marcus, for joining us for the first time. I hope that you had a good time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the breakout group chats, and all of you have lovely accents.
Thank you. Okay, so see you next time. Our next one in September is about the Enneagram and social transformation. So how do we think more broadly than Western individualism? So we're going to have some interesting people come and join us talking about social change and what is the relevance of the Enneagram, especially at a time like this where up is down and all of our brains are feeling like scrambled eggs from what's happening in the world. So how does the Enneagram resource us and what are our blind spots in using it? So we're gonna talk about that and I hope to see you there. So have a lovely evening, morning, day further, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.